Digital transformation is a process in which enterprises embrace digital technologies to improve operational efficiency and increase margins. According to ICT experts, the trend of digital transformation has developed in Vietnam. Vietnamese enterprises have used digital advances in business operation, system administration, and providing services to customers. For the last few years, some Vietnamese enterprises, especially the ICT ones, have started their process of moving toward digital transformation and gained initial successes. Recently, FPT Telecom Joint Stock Company has become the first company in Vietnam to receive the title Digital Transformer of the Year. The award was announced at the Asia Pacific Telecom Summit Awards, an event hosted by the multinational group International Data Corporation, or IDC. Hello everyone, and you're watching Sharing Vietnam on VTC 10 Net Việt. In the next 15 minutes of the program today, we are going to find out more about digital transformation as well as the importance of it to Vietnamese enterprises in this era. And please join me in welcoming the guest speaker of today's program, Andrew Pickup, the Senior Director of Communications at Microsoft Asia. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining Sharing Vietnam today. As digital transformation is something new in Vietnam, so may you share with us a brief introduction to this idea?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. It's a great pleasure to be back here in Vietnam. You're absolutely right. Digital transformation is a new trend that's really impacting many organizations as well as governments across the region. The definition of what we mean by digital transformation, it's really the maturity of three key trends that are all maturing together. The first one is around data. If you look at the history of the technology industry, it's moved from the mainframe computer, which is a big computer the size of this room, to the personal computer, to the laptop computer, to tablets, and now obviously mobile phones. So computing is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more accessible. But the next phase of that is going to be something called the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things means internet connected monitors, sensors all around us. This light above us will be connected to the internet and will tell people when it needs to be changed. That creates an enormous amount of data. The second trend is cloud computing. Traditionally, when it comes to data, it was physical, like your piece of paper here. It was a physical piece, so it was expensive to collect. Think about the ancient libraries. It was expensive and not many people had access to it. Now with cloud computing, the marginal cost of collecting data is very low. You can access a huge infrastructure at relatively low cost. So the second trend is cloud computing. And then the third trend is software analytics, sometimes called algorithms, which basically means through all of that data, looking for the trends, looking for the business opportunities. The human eye now, there's just so much, you can't do it just manually looking at a graph or looking at a pie chart or a trend map. So increasingly software companies are producing algorithms that allow decision making to be made by the machines. When you take those three trends together, data, cloud computing, and improvement in analytics, they really represent a moment for organizations that we call digital transformation to genuinely change the whole nature of the business. I think if you look at Southeast Asia and Asia generally, but especially Southeast Asia, there are a couple of characteristics that make it unique. One is large volumes of population. The second one is the youth of that population. Third thing is their use of technology. They are mobile first. And so when you're asking me, how is cloud computing and digital transformation being adopted, I would say it's being adopted faster here than it is in any other place in the world. And part of it is because of the nature of the population here and the way in which you like to work.
With what you have shared, it is easy to understand that a tech company will find it more easy for them to transform and moving forward to digital transformation. What is your idea?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's easier for tech companies to, talk about digital transformation because we're kind of living and breathing this. But let me give you an example. I'll give you an example from the agriculture industry, not from Vietnam, but I'll give you a Vietnamese example in a second. And the agriculture industry is the oldest industry in the world. That's where human beings started, planting things, growing things, et cetera, et cetera. You might look at it and say, how can the Internet of Things impact growing? But in Tasmania, in Australia, they grow oysters. They have oyster beds in an estuary in the sea, and they're growing oysters. And one of the challenges for that industry, which is a sizable industry, $100 million per year, is when it rains heavily, the sediment from the mud in the estuary rises up, and an oyster is a filter mechanism. Whatever is flowing through the water, it will filter. And if grit and salination and salt get into that, it can be dangerous for human consumption. So when that happens, they have to shut down the oyster farm. When they shut down the oyster farm, it can cost tens of thousands of dollars per day, and it obviously lacks productivity. The traditional way they would do that is they relied on the weather forecast. But now what they rely on is sensors in the water that check not only the levels of the water, but also the level of salination and the level of grit that is coming through. They use something called machine learning, which is around predicting weather patterns, etc. And in the past, when they shut down the oyster farm with the weather forecast, they were 30% inaccurate, i.e., when they look back later, they said 30% of the time we didn't need to shut down the oyster farm. Now they're far more accurate. So that's an example of where you're using the cloud, where you're using a mobile application to tell the farmer now's the time to close, or leave it open. It's perfectly safe. And that's an application been applied through cloud computing, through machine learning, through algorithms that I just described, to the oldest profession in the world, or the oldest industry in the world, which is agriculture.
To our event in which we talk about digital transformation.
In the context of a new technological revolution, marketing and media are predicted to be impacted the most with the development of technologies.
Please welcome Mr.
Recently, a workshop named Digital Transformation, Marketing and Media in the New Era was held in Hanoi with the participation of ICT experts, representative of ICT firms, leader of Vietnamese newspapers and media companies.
Lâu nay thì chúng ta có một cái câu chuyện nói rằng là Internet đang giết chết báo in, và thậm chí gần đây người ta nói rằng có thể gây nguy hại cả cho truyền hình. Thực tế thì nó không dẫn đến một cái sự chấm dứt của một cái nền tảng báo chí, mà nó khiến cho các cái thể loại này buộc phải chuyển mình đi theo những hướng mới. Và cái việc gọi là chuyển mình theo hướng digital đương nhiên là một cái xu thế chung trong tất cả các ngành, chứ không chỉ về truyền thông.
According to ICT experts, cloud computing, visual reality, and artificial intelligence will be the leading trends, especially in the process of moving toward digital transformation of marketing and media companies.
Ví dụ bây giờ đang là những cái xu hướng nổi bật hiện nay, đó là cái xu hướng về virtual reality, thực tế ảo. Thì chỉ có thể làm được với digital, chứ các cái hình thức khác thì rất là khó. Và tuy virtual reality còn rất là mới mẻ, nhưng người ta nhìn thấy đây là một thị trường vô cùng lớn lao. Nó không chỉ hiệu quả cho việc truyền tải các vấn đề nội dung báo chí, mà nó còn là một cơ hội để thu hút cái nguồn quảng cáo. Hay là những cách thức chúng tôi làm báo điện tử thì nó không chỉ còn là những việc đưa những cái nội dung mang tính văn bản, bổ sung thêm vài cái ảnh hay là một vài cái video lên trên môi trường Internet mà chúng ta gọi là báo điện tử, không phải như vậy. Bây giờ có rất nhiều cách thức để triển khai, từ cái việc là làm nội dung video short form ra làm sao, làm những bài long form kiểu gì, làm những cái infographic tương tác, hay đặc biệt là data journalism, báo chí dữ liệu, thì với môi trường digital là vô cùng quan trọng.
According to a survey by the International Data Corporation or IDC, 60% among 1,000 big firms in Asia Pacific said that digital transformation would be at the core of their business strategy in 2017, which means digital transformation is going to happen in many big enterprises in the region in the coming year. How affordable is digital transformation?
I think that the cloud is actually ideal for small businesses, because if you're a small business, the thing that you should really be focused on is finding and keeping a customer. If you look at most small businesses, IT and managing infrastructure, managing a server, managing email, patching, backing up. And that's really not what the core competency is. So moving to the cloud means that all of that, all of those processes, the security, the patching, the improvements, the upgrading of software, etc., is all managed by, in the case of Office 365, by Microsoft. And, that's, relatively cost effective for most organizations. So both from a cost perspective, but especially from an ease of use perspective, I think the idea of cloud computing is ideal for small businesses, especially here in a place like Vietnam. There is a travel agency called Trails of Indonesia, and as the name suggests, they basically manage people to have travel experiences in Vietnam, but also in Laos, in Myanmar, in Cambodia, to get a great experience. When you're planning that kind of trip for a customer, there's an awful lot of paperwork, you can imagine. There's the flights, there's the accommodation, there's the transfers, there's the side trips to the various things. There's lots of people to CC and keep in the loop. So there's a lot of paper flying around. And then the second thing is there's a lot of distributed employees. They're not sitting in the office. They might be out at the site, they might be on a bus, they might be on a plane, they might be in a coffee shop or what have you. And so one of the things that Trails of Indonesia have done is bought into cloud computing through a product that Microsoft offers called Office 365. Office 365 is our cloud-based version of our very popular and market-leading productivity suite called Office, Microsoft Office. This allows everybody to be working off the same digital platform, everybody to have access to email, all of their documents, all of their settings, regardless of which device they're using, regardless of where they happen to be. And that's improved the productivity of what is a small to medium-sized organization here in Vietnam.
Last but not least, do you have any special advice for Vietnamese small, medium-sized enterprises as well as bigger corporations on their process of moving toward digital transformation?
It's different for startups than it is for corporations. So if you're at the beginning of your journey and you have an idea, you don't need to build an infrastructure anymore. You can just access, Azure or Office 365, and you can rent computing space in exactly the same way you rent the phone and the desk and your office and everything else. You don't have to buy that infrastructure. You can just go. And typically, you might be younger and more entrepreneurial, so you might be more digitally savvy. If you're in a large organization, one of the things that typically trips up technological adoption inside an organization that can be really fabulous technology is people and culture. So in a large corporation, where you've got thousands of people, as well as implementing the technology, you may also want to think with HR, how does the culture need to change? So for example, I talked about technology allows you to collaborate. That's fine. It does allow you to collaborate. Do you have a collaborative culture? I also talked about ideas bubbling up to the senior leadership. Technology can do that. Is that the culture of the organization? And sometimes it's not like that. And therefore, I would just say that, as well as technology in its own right, you also need to think about culture and what kind of culture you're creating, especially in large corporations.
Once again, thank you so much for joining and sharing with us today. It has been very helpful, I'm sure, for the Vietnamese enterprises.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back here in Hanoi and Vietnam. Come on.
That's all we have for today's program. I hope that more and more Vietnamese enterprises have made the decision of thinking of moving toward digital transformation. If you have any questions or recommendations, please email to sharingvietnam@netvietv.net. Thank you for watching and see you next time.